All right, well, we've been going through this series, The Bad Boys of Easter, and if you're here this morning or you're watching online, and maybe you got drug in here by family or your coworkers or a friend, maybe you heard there was a donut wall. You're like, I'm going to go for the donuts. And you're here, but you're not a Christian, and you're not a Jesus follower, and not sure about the Bible, and church is probably not your normal thing, not really into that. One of the things that, I would think is maybe one of the reasons you would choose not to follow Jesus or be a Christian is, and it probably baffles you, is that we Christians often resist the God that we say we trust. In fact, if you're in-house, you got to participate even if you're at home online. If you are a Jesus follower, if you are a Christian, has there ever been a time in your life when you resisted the God you say you trust? Any shouldn't lie in church. Well, there's like 25 of you that have only resisted God. That is unbelievable. Wow. Okay, well, let's have another sermon. Let's come out with, no. So, we do, don't we? I mean, we resist the God that we say we trust. And I think, for un-Christians, they're just like, we don't sometimes, walk what we talk. And they have a word for that. It's called hypocrisy, right? But I would say this, before you judge too harshly, realize it is difficult to place God in the center of your life and trust Him with absolutely everything. A God that we do not see with our physical eyes, and a God that speaks to our conscience and speaks to us through ancient literature, through the scriptures, and can be very difficult. And there's so many things competing for the center of our life, right? There's so many things that compete to be the center of our life. And the individual that we're going to look at today, that's exactly what was going on in his life. But what was so strange is he was actually the most powerful person in the nation of Israel. His name was Joseph Caiaphas. And if you're a Bible person, you know Caiaphas. He was the Jewish high priest during the time of Jesus. And Caiaphas was the most powerful individual in the nation of Israel. And he was the connecting point between the nation of Israel and Rome. He was the one that had to keep the peace. He had extraordinary power. He had extraordinary influence. His family was kind of a dynasty of high priests for over 40 years in the nation of Israel. His father-in-law was a high priest. He had 5 brothers-in-law that were high priests. And so they kind of had a family thing going on. They kind of had a family dynasty going on, and they kind of controlled the political climate. They had incredible influence. They were extraordinarily wealthy, which if you're not Christian, you're like, that's no big surprise, is it? And they the equivalent of millions and millions and millions of dollars flowed into that 32-acre mount where the temple was. And Caiaphas was kind of the top dog in all of that. So life was really pretty good for him. But there was one guy that kind of presented a problem. His name was Jesus. What was his last name? No, before you answer, I set you up for failure. I didn't want someone to actually say Christ because that's not his last name. So some of you're like, I learned something in church the first time ever. So Christ is not Jesus' last name, even though your uncle said that when he hit his hand with the hammer, right? That is not his last name. That's actually a title, okay? So Jesus the Christ, Jesus the Messiah. And so, the problem with Caiaphas had with Jesus is there was very large crowds that began to follow Jesus. And we're not talking hundreds of people. We're talking thousands of people began following Jesus. And it made the religious leaders jealous. And they began to think, man, you know what? If we let him continue to grow these crowds, there's going to come a time when we're going to lose our influence, we're going to lose our power, we're going to lose our position, and we're going to lose our wealth. And so we can't let that happen. And Jesus had zero respect for the religious leaders, the religious establishment in his lifetime. And if you want to hear a Jesus rant, he goes on for an entire chapter. In fact, Matthew records an entire chapter of a Jesus rant against the religious leaders in Matthew chapter 23. So not right now, but you got to read it on your own. But he culminates this in Matthew 23. Matthew 23 says, Jesus says, snakes. And he's talking to the religious leaders with Caiaphas in the room. Snakes, you sons of vipers. We have a different version of that, but maybe we should change it to sons of vipers. I don't know. Snakes, sons of vipers, how will you escape the judgment of hell? Jesus told the most religious people in his day and the religious establishment and the leaders of that religious establishment. And Jesus was so sick of the corruption and just the ugliness that it had become. And he stares into those religious leaders' faces and he says, you are going to hell. So it's not surprising Caiaphas had a problem with Jesus. Right? And some of you are like, I kind of like this Jesus guy. Well, you ought to read the scriptures. It's unbelievable. So, you know, it goes on. And so the religious leaders had a plan. Their plan was to divide Jesus from the crowd. They wanted to divide Jesus from the crowd, and to do so, they would send out their best and their brightest theologians, and they would ask Jesus all of these gotcha questions to try and make him look stupid. And if they could make him look stupid and stump him and he didn't have a good answer, then the crowds would just kind of disperse and say, yeah, you know, maybe he's not who we think he is. And so they would do that over and over and over again. You read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you get to read all of these examples of these gotcha questions. And over and over and over again, instead of them making Jesus look stupid, Jesus would answer and end up making them look stupid, and all of the crowd would only chant, you know, go Jesus, and it kept getting bigger and bigger. But there was an event that happened that just it sent them over the top. They couldn't deal with it, and if you read about Jesus, and not just an average guy, this was a famous guy. Jesus rose Lazarus from the dead. And when that happened, the crowd went berserk, as you can imagine they would have. And so John records it in chapter 12. He says, many in the crowd had seen Jesus call Lazarus from the tomb. So I don't know about you, but I would never expect you to believe without seeing. And that's exactly what these guys did. Many who were in the crowd that was growing were there when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. And it wasn't like Lazarus was almost dead. Lazarus had been buried for 4 days. Like his body was starting to deteriorate. And in fact, they were telling him, Jesus, don't go in there because it's going to stink. And so they were there. They saw it with their own eyes. And seeing is believing. And so they were there when they called Lazarus from the tomb, raising him from the dead, and they were telling others about it. Well, I'm sure they were. That was the reason so many went out to meet him, because they had heard. What did they heard? They heard what these guys had seen with their own eyes. And they had heard about the miraculous sign. So the crowd was just going, it's just going wild. And they're going to make Jesus king. Right? They're going to replace what Caiaphas had put in the center of his life, and he was trying to preserve it. And he was going to do anything to preserve it, much like we try to do Well, then the Pharisees said to each other, there's nothing we can do. Look, everyone has gone after him. Nothing you can do. Are you kidding me? He raised a man from the dead. Maybe there's something you could do. Maybe like follow him. You know, if a guy raises someone else from the dead, sign me up. I will follow that individual, right? But no, see, they're not going to do that because they want to preserve what's at the center of their life. Well, then the leading priests and Pharisees called the high council together and said, what are we going to do? Now, we read that and we don't think anything about it. And I got to tell you the significance of this. There's actually 3 different groups of people that got together. There's the leading priests, there's the Pharisees, and there's the Sadducees. All together made the Sanhedrin. And here's the thing, 3 different groups of people that didn't agree necessarily theologically, and they didn't agree politically, and they didn't really like one another very much. I mean, this would be like the House and the Senate and the Supreme Court, all of the Democrats and Republicans all getting together and agreeing that we should do something together. Okay, so now you have some context, right? That's how much they saw Jesus as a threat. And they asked each other, this man certainly performs many miraculous signs. You think? Like, yeah. Well, if we allow him to go on like this, as if they were the ones allowing him to go on like this, way overestimating their influence and power. If we allow him to go on like this, soon everyone will believe in him. And we can't have that. We can't have that because that threatens what's at the center of our life. And then what? If you're in house right now and you're watching online today, then what? If you believe, if you put Jesus at the center of your life, then what? Then what for you? What is it for you? What would have to be removed from the center in order to make Jesus the center of your life? See, it was going to cost him something. Then the Roman army will come and destroy both our temple and our nation. It's going to cost us something. It's going to cost us something. And you know what? I get it. And maybe the reason you're like, I'm not going to make Jesus center of my life because it's going to cost me too much. It's going to cost me too much. And, you know, I get it. You're in house and you're a guy. I'm just going to talk to the guys for just a minute. Gals, you can talk amongst yourselves. I get it, guys. It's hard to believe. I was a guy before I was a preacher. So I'm still a guy, even though I'm a preacher. And so you're thinking, you know what? I work all week long. I'm tired. And Sunday mornings is me time. You know, and you want some you time, right? I mean, it's me time. I want my Sunday mornings, and I want to do my own thing on Sunday mornings, and I don't want others, you know, telling me what I should do on a Sunday morning. So, you know, and your wife's kind of thinking, you know, I guarantee you, if you got up and said, hey, honey, you want to go to church? She's probably not going to be like, She probably wants to go. And I tell you what, you made a fatal mistake this morning. You made a fatal mistake. If you came here with kids and you've never been here before, you might as well just plan on coming back next week. Because now your kids love it. And Sunday mornings, they're going to be on your bed waking you up to get you to come to church. And you're just like, dadgummit, now I'm coming to church and my children love it. And they're coming. And you know what? The things that I was going to spend my money on for me time, now I'm giving it away to this church. And pretty soon they're going to ask me to serve. And it's like, no. It's costing me too much. Right? I mean, if you're a high schooler here this morning, following Jesus, putting Jesus center of your life, it's going to cost you. It won't be convenient. If you're single, you're like, could I just date and get married and then follow Jesus? Put Jesus, because if I put Jesus in the center of my life while I'm dating, that might mean I might have to date a Christian. And do you know how many cute Christian singles there are? Like almost none, right? And you're like, it's gonna cost you. Right? So it's not convenient. It's gonna cost you something. Well, Caiaphas, we're introduced to him now, who was high priest at the time, said, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't realize that it's better for you. I mean, it's better for me, but no, we're going to talk about you guys. It's you, yeah. You know, it's better for you that one man should die for me and for us. But no, it's for the people. It's for the people. It would be better that one man should die. It's for the people than for the whole nation to be destroyed. And so they came up with this plan, and it's so interesting. As they resisted Jesus, they actually facilitated the will of God. And so will we. In fact, we will be illustrations of the futility of resisting God by either saying yes, even though it cost me, or no, because it cost me too much. See, we will each illustrate the futility of resisting God because you were not created for your glory. You were created for God's glory. And your life, even if you stiff-arm God your whole life, in some way will bring glory to God. And you might think that you're able to resist the will of God, that you're somehow able to resist his plan, that you're able to resist not being a part of the story of God, but you will be a part of the story of God, whether you resist or whether you choose to surrender. The question is, which side of it will you be on? So from that time on, the Jewish leaders began to plot Jesus' death. They thought they could take his life. Maybe they missed what Jesus had said a chapter before. And Jesus said in John chapter 10, he says, the Father loves me because I sacrificed my life so I may take it back up again. No one takes my life from me, for I have authority to lay it down and also to take it back up again. I voluntarily sacrifice it. I voluntarily lay it down. No one takes it from me. I lay it down. I take it back up. See, what Caiaphas didn't understand, and I think sometimes we don't understand, is Caiaphas thought that he could resist God, and it's so interesting, out of anyone that was on the planet at that time, Caiaphas should have recognized Jesus first as the Messiah, as the Son of God, as the Christ. But he was so busy keeping something else at the center of his life, he didn't even recognize him, even though he was sometimes in the same room with him. And Caiaphas became a footnote in the story of Jesus the Christ. Caiaphas thought that Jesus was going to become a footnote in the story of Joseph Caiaphas. And you and I and all of you online, we will be a footnote in the story of Jesus as well. The question is what will the story tell? Will it tell of a man or a woman who stiff-armed God their entire life because they wanted to preserve and keep something else in the center of their life, and they were not willing to surrender to God? Or will it be a story of surrender, sweetly surrendered to the God who's in control of the universe? See, there's a little bit of Caiaphas in all of us, isn't there? And we want to preserve life for us and our glory. We want to preserve some glory for us. We kind of want life to be about us. We want to preserve life for us and our glory, and consequently, we put a little God in the center of our life rather than God himself. Every single thing that we put in the center of our life other than God is a little God. And that little God, you're serving it, you're feeding it, you're propping it up, you're funding it. It has your attention. You obey it when it calls. But every one of those is a little God. But here's what you need to know this morning that Caiaphas found out the hard way. The little gods always disappoint. They do. They always disappoint. The little gods always disappoint because they bring no solution to the three things that plague mankind: sin, sorrow, and death. That's why some of you don't like the word sin, and you're like, I don't even think there is sinners. I'm not sure how you could live right now in the world and not say there's sinners. There's plenty of sorrow, right? And sin is just simply this. Here's a Jesus definition of sin. Anything that you do that hurts you or someone else in the near term or in the long run. Anything that you do, anything that you say that hurts you or someone else in the near term or in the long run. That's sin. And sorrow, right? I mean, there's all kinds of sorrow in our world right now. In fact, I would imagine maybe one of the reasons you're here this morning is you don't see a whole lot of hope in this world. And you're not sure, you don't see any hope in your world. And you don't know what to do with it. And whatever it is that you're placing in the center of your life right now doesn't have a solution for this either. And death? No, I won't even go to a funeral. I won't even go to a funeral because I avoid that like the plague. I don't want to talk about death. I don't want to face it. I don't want to look at it. I want to pretend that, you know what, that is so far down the road that, someday, somewhere, but not right now, and I'm not going to look at it. I can't think, and sometimes it creeps in on you at night, right, when it's really quiet and your drinking buddies aren't around you and kind of propping you up, and at times you're kind of like, I don't want to die. It's like you don't know what to do with it. You don't have a solution for it. You see, Easter, we celebrate the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. And the reason we do that, it is the only solution to sin, sorrow, and death. It's the only solution. When Jesus died, there was a perfect sacrifice made for sin. And so because of this, now there is forgiveness for this. Because of Jesus' death, and the reason we know he died is because they buried him. That's what you do with people who die. You bury them. And Jesus lived a perfect life, laid it down, and paid the sacrifice of sin. So now there's forgiveness of sin. The resurrection broke the power of sin and broke the power of death. It put handcuffs on death. Death was arrested, permanently put in jail. Now, I don't know about you, but a world that would not have sin, if there's a solution for sin and there's a solution for death, that takes care of sorrow. So we live in this world where there's forgiveness of sin that's available. We live in this world where the power of sin is broken. We live in a world that continues to be broken, but as we look forward, we are citizens of heaven. And in that place, there will be no sin, no sorrow, and no death. And I don't know about you, but I think that's worth celebrating. I mean, that brings hope in the middle of a world that has very little to no hope whatsoever. So do we experience sorrow in this life? Certainly we do. But right behind that sorrow is an eternal joy knowing what's coming. Death? I'm scared to die. In fact, don't voluntarily prop me up. If I knock over right here, don't be resuscitating me, doggone it. I want to be with Jesus. So I am not scared of death whatsoever. It is the solution for sin, sorrow, and death. I just put all of the nurses into convulsions. Like, should we? No. He said no. Sorry. The little gods always disappoint. But here's what you need to know. The pressure to preserve the little gods that you've placed in the center of your life will push you to self-destructive behavior. It will. Caiaphas had the oldest copy of the law of God that God had put in stone and given to Moses. Caiaphas had in his possession the oldest copy of the law of God that said, "Thou shalt not murder." But in order to preserve what was at the center of his life, he had an innocent man murdered. It will lead you to self-destructive behavior. The pressure to preserve, because it disappoints. See, the little gods always disappoint, but you need to know that the little gods eventually disappear. Not only do they disappoint, but eventually what you have placed in the center of your life, if it's something other than God, it will eventually disappear. So while saying yes to God will cost you something, and it will, saying no will cost you even more. See, while saying yes to God will cost you something and saying no will cost you more, it will cost you more, including the very thing that you're putting in the place of God right now. You're like, now, Eric, if I put Jesus in the center of my life, that means I've got to, I'm afraid he's going to ask me to stop partying. And I don't want to do that. I have a feeling he's going to ask me to surrender every part of my life. I have a feeling he's going to ask me to surrender some of my possessions to him, and my stuff to him, and my wealth to him, and my boat to him, and my toys to him, and I'm going to have to surrender it all, and I'm going to have to make it available to him. If he wants to use it, then he's going to use it, and if he wants me to, if he wants me to get rid of it, then I'm going to have to obey and get rid of it, and I don't want to do that. But there will come a day that no matter what it is, and I don't know what it is for you that maybe competes for the center of your life, but whatever that is, there will come a day when it will disappear. It will be gone. And then what will you have? So my question for you this Easter morning is, what is keeping you from surrendering? Well, if I did that, I would have to run my business for Jesus. I would have to use biblical principles to run my business, and it's tax season. I would have to trust him. See? It's hard, isn't it? What's keeping you from surrendering? What's keeping you from putting Jesus first in your life? The kids at school, man, they're going to make fun of me. It's hard. It's hard to be an athlete. It's hard to be, it's hard to be, high school. It's hard to be involved in extracurricular activities. It's hard to be a single. It's hard to live in the workplace. I mean, that would mean I would have to put a guard over my mouth. I would have to begin to encourage people rather than tear people down. Oh, it's going to cost me. What's keeping you? Whatever it is that's keeping you, you just need to know there's going to come a day when it'll be gone. So my invitation to you and my challenge to you is, would you put Jesus first in your life today? Would you do that? Would you begin to follow Jesus? Begin to put him first? Begin to say, you know what, man, Jesus, if there's something, you want me to do about this, what is it? And allow him to be your leader. Allow him to be your Lord. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, it's so hard to put Jesus first in our life because it threatens us. It threatens the things that we think he's going to take away. It threatens the things that we've always known, and we hold on to those little gods, even though they lead us to self-destructive behavior time and time and time again. And we hate that it does that. In fact, we don't even like ourselves when we go down that path. So God, I pray that you would give people today the courage to make the decision to put Jesus at the center of their life. That they would say, Jesus, I don't know exactly what all this looks like, but right now I'm just telling you, I'm surrendering my life to you. And I'm asking you to come into the center of my life and lead me. I surrender. In Jesus' name, amen.